Good morning, this is Chris
And Brian,
reading the Society News for Friday the 15th of February 2019. On Tuesday the 19th of February, the swimming group are swimming at the waterside pool in Ryde. The pool is closed to the public whilst the group swims. There are male and female volunteers to help you get in and out of the pool, as well as lifeguards to ensure your safety. To join the swimming group, please call the site for Wight first to notify us of your swimming ability. You need to register with the office at Millbrook House first to be able to swim with the group.
Wednesday 20th of February. The weekly coffee morning will be held at Millbrook House this week from 10:30 a.m. There will also be our low vision drop-in between 10 a.m. and 12 noon, a weekly event to allow you to view and try the low vision equipment we have at the Society without the need for an appointment. The Wednesday social group will be meeting on Wednesday at 2 p.m. in Millbrook House. The entertainment this week will be a talk by Derek Sprake. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake.
Thursday the 21st of February. The Thursday social group are meeting at Millbrook House. The group meets from 10:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. You can knit or just have a chat. Then later in the afternoon, volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics.
Friday 22nd of February. The Striders group will be meeting for a lake circular stride. The group will meet at the bus stop outside the shops in Lake at 10:15 a.m. The walk is about 4.75 miles and is expected to take about 2.5 hours. A table is booked for lunch at the Old Corner Bank in Sandown for 1 p.m. If you would like to join the Striders group, then please contact the Society on 522205 or email members@iwsb.org.uk.
Any other news? The Fellowship for the Visually Impaired will meet on Saturday the 23rd of February at Bethany Evangelical Church, Union Street, Newport at 3 p.m. The speaker this month will be Mr. Dave Lovell. There will be hymns, a quiz, story reading and a short Christian message. Hymn books and scripture are in large print and braille. A collection is taken from which donations are made to Torch Trust for the Blind. For further details, please contact Mrs. Jackie Moore on 520797. Members and volunteers are invited to the Site for Wight annual general meeting, which will be held on Tuesday the 26th of February at Millbrook House. Join us for refreshments from 9:30 a.m. in the Activities Suite, where we will be promoting new events, activities and opportunities, as well as displaying various items of low vision equipment. The formal AGM will take place in the meeting room starting at 10:30 a.m. Please send an email to members@iwsb.org.uk or telephone 522205 to advise us that you will be attending so that we may know the numbers we are catering for. We look forward to welcoming you. The March strollers will be taking place a week earlier than usual on Tuesday the 5th of March. Laura will be ringing round the regular strollers as usual, just a week earlier. If you would like to join the strollers walking group, then please call 522205 or email members@iwsb.org.uk.
This week's InTouch, attack on guide dog. In November of last year, Emily Brothers' guide dog, Truffle, was attacked by two dogs in Sutton, South London. As a result of her injuries, Truffle was out of action for 6 weeks. Emily was unhappy with the support she received from the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association. Reporter Dave Williams spoke to Emily at her home. John Carlin from GDBA responds. Also, we hear listeners' feedback from the radio play Blind School, which was broadcast on Radio 4 last Tuesday and which featured on InTouch on January the 29th. We also include your comments on the extended podcast from the same programme. And finally, also following feedback from a listener, we hear from Hugh Brasher on the London Marathon's U-turn to award official medals to guide runners. Presenter Peter Wight, reporter Dave Williams, producer Tom Walker.
And now for the headlines from the county press on Friday the 15th of February. Don't let our island become a suburb. The island is in danger of becoming an extension of Southampton and Portsmouth's urban sprawl if the Isle of Wight Council's planning strategy goes forward, campaigners have warned. The Isle of Wight Campaign to Protect Rural England, CPRE, is pleading with the council to rethink its island planning strategy. It has also urged island residents to wake up to the dangers. The campaign body says the plan, which includes building 9,615 new homes, is not in the interest of islanders and will destroy hundreds of acres of countryside. The Island Planning Strategy is a document that will shape planning policy until 2035. It will see a massive increase in house building, with the majority on greenfield sites. There is also the potential for 2 completely new villages to be built in open countryside, one near Wellow, the other near Arreton. The CPRE says the new housing is not needed by islanders, but is being built to meet the demand of those who want to move to the island, such as retirees or those wanting second homes on the Isle of Wight. Ian Welby, campaigner and CPRE member, said, "The island plan is a big con. It is being sold as delivering on the islanders' needs, but that is not what it is doing. The population of the islanders is declining, not increasing. This is about meeting external demands. People are being hoodwinked into thinking that we need this for our children. We have around 60,000 houses on the Isle of Wight, and they want to add 10,000 to that in 15 years. This kind of approach could turn the island into an extension of Southampton and Portsmouth's urban sprawl. It will put pressure on our infrastructure, our health service, and will do untold damage to our rural landscape. Should we be destroying countryside for this external demand for housing? There is a need for housing for islanders, but we can fill our social housing needs by building on brownfield sites. If the council is going to put taxpayers' money to work, it should be investing in brownfield sites, but it is easier to carpet over green fields. I don't think people realise just how much is going to be built. It is a huge amount of destruction."
Alex Haig-Thomas, chair of CPRE on the Isle of Wight, said, "We are a tourist island and people won't come here to see more tarmac and more housing developments like those that are exactly the same all over the country. Once these greenfield sites have been built on, they are gone for good. No one is going to spend money to dig up concrete and re-establish ancient woodland. The island plan includes lots of good things, such as the Dark Skies Initiative and other protections, but we have got to say no to this number of houses. There's nothing wrong with championing beauty. It is worth fighting for the landscape and wildlife on the Isle of Wight. Hundreds of acres of greenfield space is going to be turned into tarmac and housing. It is a large cost the island will pay. Isle of Wight Councillor for Newport North, Matt Price, has joined the call to rethink the island plan's housing proposals, strongly protesting a proposed land allocation that could see 880 new houses on land between Fairley Road and Staplers Road. Councillor Price said, having recently met our MP Bob Seeley on the subject of the island plan review, it has become clear the housing target for the island is undeliverable on a huge scale. We must, as a planning authority, work with the government to ensure an appropriate housing target which can realistically meet our actual housing need for the island. The deadline for consultation on the island plan is February the 25th. Anyone can take part on the Isle of Wight Council's website.
Police deal with grenade and paint. Police were called twice to a freshwater home to deal with a smoke grenade posted through the letterbox and a paint-like substance thrown over the front door. Police were called just after 9 p.m. on Monday when the grenade was posted to the bungalow in Sunset Close. Officers returned shortly before 9 a.m. the following day after a paint-like substance was thrown over the owner's front door. The 53-year-old male resident was treated for smoke inhalation and reported not to be seriously injured. One neighbour told the county press she was thinking of going away and described the incident as frightening to hell. Nothing happens along here at all, usually, she said. It was horrible. Another resident said, I've lived on the close since 2009 and it's been pretty quiet throughout that time. It's not nice and I don't really feel any less safe. One couple said they hoped it was an isolated incident. David Arthur Hopkins, 58, of Sunset Close, has been charged with causing arson with intent, assault, 2 offences of possession of a prohibited weapon, and 2 offences of purchasing a prohibited weapon. He will appear at the Isle of Wight Crown Court on Monday, March the 25th.
Tourists spend more on island. More people are coming to the Isle of Wight as tourists, and the amount they spend has increased. Research compiled by Tourism South East shows 2018 saw an increase in the total visitor spending over the year, up by 9% to £303 million, which means an average spend per head per trip of £127.92. Holiday visits to the Isle of Wight also saw an increase of 5% compared to 2017. Although short breaks fell by 2% across the year, holidaymakers spending 5 nights or more saw a significant rise of 19% in 2018. Will Miles, Managing Director of Visit Isle of Wight, said, "It was definitely a year where all the seasons came into play. It was heavy snow when I first started my job in March. There was rain through Easter, and we saw at the end of August lots of heavy rain and glorious temperatures for much of the summer. It's been amazing. Visit Isle of Wight's remit to increase visitors to the island in the shoulder months has shown an increase of 9.2% compared to the previous year. Will added, we've seen visitor figures increase through the shoulder seasons, certainly in quarter one, which was up by 0.2%, and in quarter four, October, November and December, which was up by 9%. These figures are demonstrating our goal to increase visitors here throughout the year is continuing to succeed. This can only happen with the unceasing support of tourism businesses through the Wight bid, or through voluntary contributions, and obviously through our strategic business partners as well. It's crucial we continue to work in this way and to keep the island in the spotlight, to make sure it is the destination of choice. Will also paid tribute to the small team at Visit Isle of Wight for making the most of the budget available to them. We don't have as much marketing spend as some of the other regions, he said. Abby Fox, brand manager at Visit Isle of Wight, said, "We recently launched our Discover the Isle of Wight 4 campaign during Twixmas 2018, giving people more reasons to visit the island, along with a chance to enter a competition to win a holiday worth over £2,500. We're very pleased with the success of the campaign so far and look forward to continue working with island businesses throughout 2019. Visit Isle of Wight has also helped generate £3.9 million worth of media coverage for the island, which accounts for an increase of 42% on 2017. Journalists and TV producers who are looking for items for their media outlets will contact Visit Isle of Wight to discover what the island has to offer. When they do, they liaise with Visit Isle of Wight press officer Sue Emerson. Sue said, "The level of press engagement in 2018 has clearly had a positive impact in getting the word out about what the island has to offer, and so far this year, interest from journalists has been even higher." The involvement from businesses on the island is crucial in demonstrating what there is to discover. From exciting attractions and events, great walking and cycling routes, picturesque villages, seaside resorts and historic towns, and of course, great locally sourced food and drink.
Superdog Milo aims to clean up. Meet Milo, the Isle of Wight's litter picker extraordinaire. Milo is an 11-year-old Springer Spaniel who just can't stop picking up rubbish. And even a conservative estimate puts Milo's haul at more than 1,000 bottles in the last 2 years. He goes for daily walkies with his owner, Carol Boyce of Newport, and will do anything needed to fill a plastic bag with discarded waste, whether he needs to fully immerse himself in the River Medina, jump into a pond, or rummage into the depths of a hedge. Carol said, "He started about 2 years ago. He started bringing me bottles, probably thinking I would throw them for him, and I just started putting them in a plastic bag. The more I bag up, the more he goes to fetch. He thinks it's a good game. He goes hunting, and his favourite find is a Lucasade bottle. He is not so keen on cans, as he cut his mouth once, but he still retrieves them. Mainly we go along the cycle path next to the River Medina from Newport towards Island Harbour, or we go to the beach. It is unbelievable what rubbish is around. Aerosol cans, glass bottles, you name it. But he is funny. He will go into the water and fish it all out." Milo is getting well known now, as lots of walkers stop to chat to Carol to find out what they're getting up to. She often sees other people with bin bags carrying out a litter pick, but doesn't know of any other litter picking dogs. He is a really good dog, she said. I reckon on average we salvage 6 to 20 bottles a day, and we've been doing this for 2 years, so it adds up to a lot of rubbish. This side of the river must be a lot cleaner now, thanks to Milo, so I am very proud of him.
Couple's fraud totals £170,000. A couple who defrauded the Isle of Wight Council out of £170,000 have been spared jail. Paul, 59, and Susan Templeman, 68, of Allotment Road, Knighton, admitted fraud charges at the Isle of Wight Crown Court. They were not sent to prison because they care for Susan's severely disabled 43-year-old daughter. Over several years, the pair claimed money for a personal care assistant for their daughter, falsely claiming they were both in full-time work. Poonam Patney, prosecuting, told the Isle of Wight Crown Court yesterday. However, a care assistant was never employed, and when the council carried out checks against the claim, the couple falsified timesheets and bank transactions. Paul Templeman was a registered personal care assistant for the council, so knew how to navigate the system, the court heard. The pair used details of one of his colleagues, claiming she was providing the care. Mr. Templeman also claimed money for caring for other people with special needs, claiming he worked multiple hours when he actually only carried out brief visits, often no longer than half an hour, Ms. Patney said. For the Templemans, Oscar Vincent said, on speaking to both defendants, it is immediately apparent the offending behaviour is primarily motivated by a desire to provide for the daughter. Mr. Vincent said the fraudulent claims started as small amounts and they lost track and had no idea of the full scale of what they were doing. When the investigation happened, they were horrified by the amount, Mr. Vincent said. Mr. Vincent pointed out the money was not spent on a lavish lifestyle. Some of the money was spent renovating their 2-bedroom bungalow to improve access for their daughter's wheelchair. However, some of it was spent on holidays. The money had been paid back in full to the Isle of Wight Council by Mr. Templeman's elderly parents. Judge Roger Hetherington said, if there was ever a case that demonstrates the difficulty courts face in sentencing, it is this. The court has to sentence you for the very substantial fraud committed against the council taxpayers and the individual vulnerable people in the community who are meant to be receiving care. Because of the fundamental dishonesty and abuse of trust, this richly deserves a sentence of immediate imprisonment. However, that would be appalling punishment on your very severely disabled daughter for whom you give complete care. Were you to receive an immediate custodial sentence, the effect would be disastrous for her. Both Mr. and Mrs. Templeman received 2 years prison, suspended for 2 years. Mr. Templeman will have to complete 24 days rehabilitation, and the pair will have to pay £300 court costs.
Judge. Flasher needs help. A flasher who was caught on a public footpath naked with a dog toy, Vaseline, ladies' underwear and a pornographic magazine appeared at the Isle of Wight Crown Court last Friday. Simon Powell, 44, of Terrace Road, Newport, admitted 8 counts of exposure under the Sexual Offences Act. 6 of those offences took place on a footpath between Newport and Shide. 1 took place in the churchyard in St John's Road, Newport, and 1 took place at Bignor Place, Newport. Among those who witnessed Powell exposing himself were a mother with her child, a pensioner and a dog walker, at the court heard. Powell admitted to police he experienced a sexual thrill from being outside naked. Representing Powell, Elizabeth Busty-Jones said her client needed therapy and counselling. She said he had lost his job because of the offences. Judge Roger Hetherington said, "This sort of display by you is very upsetting to those who witness it and has left them shaken up. Plainly, there are psychological problems behind this and you should seek help for that. This must not reoccur. If it does, you will be at the risk of a prison sentence." Powell was given a community order of 12 months with up to 30 rehabilitation days.
Towering landmark to disappear. A huge industrial complex will be blown up to make way for almost 1,400 homes under plans submitted by a Hampshire consortium. The former Fawley Power Station, which occupies a 300-acre site beside Southampton Water, will be destroyed in a series of controlled explosions if the application is given the go-ahead. Buildings earmarked for demolition include the power station's 650-foot chimney, one of the Solent's biggest and best-known landmarks. 2 years ago, owners Fawley Waterside unveiled plans to open a glass-sided restaurant at the top of the stack, which towers over the surrounding countryside. But its proposal to retain the massive structure ran into opposition from planning chiefs, which criticised the chimney's detrimental impact on the New Forest National Park. Fawley Waterside said the stack is due to be replaced by what it describes as a smaller but very elegant building. The consortium wants to flatten the power station in a 3-phase scheme expected to take 2 years. If the application is approved, explosives will be used to destroy the boiler house, the turbine hall and the chimney. The circular control room, often dubbed the Flying Saucer, is also due to be demolished. Fawley Waterside has devised an £800 million plan to build 1,380 homes on the site, plus shops, community facilities and a luxury marina.
New Daisy bus for cancer patients. A new Daisy bus is being purchased to help Isle of Wight cancer patients attend hospital appointments. Grant funding has enabled Wessex Cancer Trust to buy the new vehicle, and the incredible fundraising efforts of Islanders have also helped to ensure that it is now funded well into 2020. The bus provides a vital transport service for island cancer patients, taking them to their Portsmouth hospital appointments for free, but funding cuts in 2017 had posed a threat to the service. To celebrate the arrival of the new vehicle and the success of the appeal, the charity is hosting a thank you event for all supporters on Wednesday. Taking place at the charity's support centre in Lugley Street, Newport, the event will be held between noon and 2 p.m, with a speech and toast at 1 p.m. Those attending include island businesses and organisations that have been heavily involved in protecting the service. Among them are the island's Freemasons and the Isle of Wight Prostate Cancer Support Group, who raised thousands towards the appeal, and Hover Travel, which has donated 10% of its ticket fares from patients travelling across the water. The new bus, which was funded by grants from the Cloth Workers Foundation and Football for Cancer, will be showcased at the event.
School must close, says councillor. Following the news, a West Wight primary school could close due to falling pupil numbers, An Isle of Wight councillor has singled out All Saints in freshwater as the only logical choice. Newport West councillor Chris Whitehouse said All Saints CE Primary School was no longer sustainable and must close. Last week, the Isle of Wight Council said a West Wight primary school could close due to an anticipated decline in the number of young children living in the area. The council said a consultation would be carried out before any decision was made. Councillor Whitehouse said All Saints, where admissions are said to drop from 30 to 15 children a year, was the most likely choice for closure. All Saints had been rated requires improvement by Ofsted for the past decade. Bryston Primary School also requires improvement, and the other 3 primary schools in the area, St Saviour's in Totland, Shelfleet and Yarmouth primary schools, are rated good. In a letter to Bishop Philip Egan, the Catholic leader of Portsmouth Diocese, Councillor Whitehouse said St Saviour's RC Primary School should be open to All Saints pupils in an act of Christian solidarity. The only logical outcome of a review of places in the West Wight will be that All Saints is no longer sustainable and must close, he said in the letter. He said it is important the Catholic ethos at St Saviour's was maintained. When asked for a response to Councillor Whitehouse's suggestion, All Saints referred all questions to the Council. The Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Councillor Paul Brading, said he would lead the process with the best interests of the children in mind. A formal paper will be published today, Friday, with a 6-week consultation beginning in March.
The oldest resident of the Isle of Wight has turned 109. Elsie Irene Morris celebrated her birthday with a party on Monday at Newport Residential Home, where she has lived for 14 years. She asked staff how old she was turning, and when they said 109, she replied, "That's getting on a bit, isn't it? I only feel like 30. Elsie is thought to be the 32nd oldest person in the UK. Elsie was born on February the 11th, 1910 at Heath Farm, Staplers, the third child of Morris and Ada Sibbick. In 1933 she married Douglas Morris and had 2 children, Sue and John. She spent most of her life working on farms, horse riding, milking cows and tending to the other animals. Elsie and Douglas moved to a farm in Shorewell in 1946, and Elsie lived there until she was 95 years old. Her granddaughter, Vanessa Whitewood, said, "In October she was in hospital with pneumonia, but she got over that. She has had it 4 times recently, but she is very strong and very determined. She looks better this year than she did last year."
Crazily mental teacher assaulted his student. An island teacher went crazily mental and assaulted a student, the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court heard. Graham Bell, a former Cowes Enterprise College teacher, was found guilty of assault by beating at a previous Crown Court trial, and on Monday was sentenced to a 12-month community order. Anne Smout, prosecuting, said another teacher had asked the student, who cannot be named for legal reasons, to sit down and eat their food, but they wouldn't. Bell, 46, of Coronation Road, Cowes, then went over to the child, grabbed their shoulders, pulled them forcibly for some distance, and then pushed them to the ground, the court heard. In evidence, a fellow teacher described Bell in that moment as crazily mental and said she heard the student call out, "Stop, get off me." The student, who was described as visibly upset, had walked away in an effort to hide their reaction from other students. In a victim statement read out to the court, the victim spoke of their fear when approached by teachers and said they had been worried and scared since the incident. For Bell, Miss Chapman said this was the first time he had appeared in court. The incident had been completely out of character for the defendant, who had been a teacher for 18 years, and that it was a moment of madness on Bell's part. The sentencing hearing heard Bell had lost his job and would never be able to work with children again. Miss Chapman described Bell's diminished job prospects as a punishment worse than the court could give. A school spokesperson said, "Clearly the behaviour of this former member of our staff was absolutely unacceptable and has no place in any school. The safety and well-being of our students is always our number one priority, and we have robust safeguarding procedures in place to ensure this. As soon as this incident happened, we suspended the member of staff involved and informed all relevant authorities. He has since been dismissed following a disciplinary hearing. Magistrates also sentenced Bell to 100 hours of unpaid work with £480 costs."
Funeral director sacked. A funeral director has been fired after engaging in inappropriate sex act with a colleague at a Newport funeral home. Hamilton and Marshall Funeral Home fired the funeral director following an allegation of unprofessional conduct made against him and a temporary member of staff, the funeral home said. The incident, which had happened months earlier, was reported in November when an allegation was made to the company. The funeral home immediately suspended the man pending investigation and terminated the employment of the temporary member of staff. A spokesman for Hamilton and Marshall said he has not been at work or conducted funerals since. Following an investigation, they admitted that an inappropriate sex act took place on our premises and he was dismissed on January the 31st. The female member of staff also no longer works for us.
Bid to axe 880 home development from plan. An Isle of Wight councillor has slammed plans to allocate land between Fairley Road and Staplers Road for the development of 880 new houses. Councillor Matt Price, ward member for Newport North, is urging residents to have their voices heard in the ongoing consultation over the island planning strategy. A pocket of land adjacent to New Fairley Farm has been proposed as a possible site for housing development with as many as 880 new homes. Councillor Price said, "Identifying a site which is locked into two of the busiest roads on the island, which are forever gridlocked, is pure madness. We have two local primary schools with virtually no capacity. We have no local services such as dentists and GP surgeries for these potential 880 families. The mistakes of Pan Meadows will run deep into Newport's future, and with that development, which is still barely viable, how can there be any justification for another huge-scale housing development which could in reality never be delivered? We'll be told infrastructure will be provided within a development of this scale, but some green spaces and footpaths will never be enough." Previous developments, including the Hawthorne Meadows and Pan Meadows developments, had promised community centres, additional education services, doctors and dentist surgeries. Have any of these been delivered? The answer is no. I cannot and will not accept this site is right for this scale of development. Newport and Carisbrooke Parish Council unanimously objected to this site and my residents overwhelmingly object to this site being included as a residential development site. I will viciously oppose this site's inclusion in the future land supply allocations and will be seeking the Cabinet support on ensuring this is removed in its entirety from the Island Plan review. The deadline for consultation on the Island Plan is February the 25th. Anyone can take part on the Isle of Wight Council's website.
Man took vodka from shop. A shoplifter who stole vodka from Tesco and took a mobile home that had been left in a phone that had been left in a trolley has appeared in court. Neil Higgins, 47, of Thornton Manor Drive, Ryde, admitted the thefts and was sentenced last Thursday at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court. Anne Smout, prosecuting, told the court Higgins had picked up a bottle of vodka and 2 energy drinks at Tesco in Ryde. He also spotted a mobile phone left in a trolley and took it as he walked past, Mrs. Smout said. Police viewed CCTV to identify Higgins, and when they went to arrest him, he told them the phone was at Aspire Ryde, where he volunteered. The phone was returned to the owner 2 days later, Mrs. Smout said. Higgins admitted he had £30 in his pocket when he went into the supermarket, but decided not to pay. He had a long criminal record of thefts and had not had a conviction for around a year. Representing Higgins, Liz Miller said her client had acted impulsively, which, she said, had been his problem in the past. Higgins told police he didn't know why he stole the phone. Magistrates sentenced him to a 12-month conditional discharge and ordered him to pay £19.58 in compensation to Tesco for the items stolen, as well as £85 court costs and a £20 surcharge.
Kitesurfer breaks ankle. A kitesurfer who broke his ankle after jumping around 60 feet in the air had to grit his teeth and drag himself up Yaverland Beach to safety. Kian Forster, 29, of Sandown, who had gone out to take advantage of windy conditions, had launched himself around 60 feet into the air before coming down harder and faster than he had been expecting and landing badly on the water. I had one foot in the board and the other was out, Kian said. It was the impact with the water that broke my ankle. I managed to get myself to the beach and then crawl on my hands and knees up the beach and then up the steps to the car park. I had some friends in the car park, so I waited in one of my friends' van while we called an ambulance. Many people rushed to help, including Richard Payne, who ended up taking him to A&E. His ankle was so badly broken it required a metal plate and 3 screws, but that still hasn't put him off his sport. I'm so passionate about kitesurfing, I really don't want this to put people off the sport. Kian has been kitesurfing since he was 14 and teaches water sports in the summer. In the winter he works on the mainland, but doctors have signed him off for a while to rest up. It is nice to spend some more time with my family as I work a lot, Kian said, seeing the bright side of his injury. I want to thank everyone who helped me out. My friends who sorted me out at Yaverland, the hospital staff who were very kind and helpful, and my family who have been amazing.
Warning over Isle of Wight council tax scam. Islanders have been warned by Trading Standards to be wary of a scam email regarding council tax. The email, which informs the receiver they have overpaid in council tax and are due a refund, looks genuine and has the HMRC logo and a link to an official-looking website with a government logo. It directs you to a link where you will be asked to complete a form which requests bank and card details. A spokesperson from Trading Standards said, "This is a scam. Your council tax payment is made to the Isle of Wight Council and not a government website, and the council would never contact you in this way. If you receive this email, delete it straight away. Do not click on any links, and under no circumstances should you give out your bank account or card details in this way."
Facelift for popular Ventnor town pub. A popular Ventnor pub is to have a major £280,000 refurbishment. The Blenheim is closing after last orders on Saturday for the works by licensee Debbie Cardwell and Heineken-owned Star Pubs and Bars. The pub will be closed for 5 weeks and will start serving food when it reopens in the 3rd week of March. The pub is having a complete top-to-toe refurbishment to bring it up to date and give it a fresh, smarter look while retaining its traditional character. A new courtyard garden is being created, cosy stoves installed, plus a modern commercial kitchen is being added to allow the pub to offer home-cooked food for the first time in many years. Debbie took over the Blenheim 2 years ago and plans to introduce poker, quiz and race nights and to start up pool and darts teams. She said, "Every day is different, and it's nice to bring happiness to people, whether it is enjoying a pint or listening to music." And it's goodbye for this week from Brian.
And it's goodbye from Chris.
Hello from Paul.
Hello from Sarah.
I'm going to start with the letters. This is a letter, "Thanks for helping the snow," from Jill Haviland at Halverston. I'd like to say a really big thank you, Todd and Jackie Carter from Chapel Furlong Farm. Halverston, who ventured out aboard their tractor to rescue myself and a friend from a treacherous middle road when the snow fell. Having already encountered a fallen tree on Willingham Road, we were then faced with a sight of the middle road near Tapnell Barns, strewn with struck or abandoned vehicles, as drivers had failed to get up the hill. I'm not sure if the road had been gritted at all, but the conditions on the road were a complete nightmare. Having safely parked the car off the carriageway, we walked up the hill to meet our saviours. We were taken home by Adam Brodie, while Todd and Jackie continued to help other drivers. What stars! We feel very fortunate to live in a village with such caring neighbours.
Here's a letter from Mandy Gibbons in Shanklin about using Camp Hill prison. Well, the former prison. Here is a suggestion to sort out the problem of people in hospital not yet ready to go home, who sometimes, due to lack of help and support there, are soon readmitted. The Isle of Wight Council has been offered the unused prisons by HMP for £1, instead of considering selling it for a fast buck to a profiteering developer. Another housing estate with more people to use the stretched hospital. It would be better for all if the council joined forces with the NHS and government agencies to provide Camp Hill Convalescent and Recuperation Centre. Upgrade the existing building to provide bedrooms and common spaces for recovering patients, yet still close enough to the hospital for follow-up treatment, and medical staff to attend, if necessary, for example, doctors or physiotherapists. As the patients improve and gain strength, they'll be helpful to each other and provide companionship, with staff on hand to encourage practical progress and the combination of confidence and independence returning. Quicker discharge will result. I'm sure the exercise yard could be transformed into a peaceful garden to aid recuperation and expect local volunteers and charities would be more than willing to help the project generally. A win-win scenario, surely.
I now move on a letter. Sorry, M&S. This is from Lynn Murdoch, Chilton, who still plans to invade M&S. A few years ago, when M&S installed its new cash machine at the store entrance, some staff may recall an elderly customer who arrived to pay her account and found herself facing this new machine instead of her accustomed letterbox inside the store. She selected the only slot available and proceeded to force her envelope through it. It wouldn't go, and meanwhile customers were arriving unable to use the now occupied machine. One helpful gentleman joined the challenge using a nail file as a tool. The lady in question sought help from a member of staff who fetched the manageress. Horrified, she explained the slot was simply for producing money requesting to be delivered. The next step was to inform headquarters, who arranged for engineers to fix the problem. An out-of-order notice was put up, at which point the irascible lady offered to go home. Last week this same lady took a pound coin out of her pocket and tried without success to get a parking ticket. Again at M&S, not to be beaten, she tried a different machine. Still no luck. Again another gentleman offered to try. No luck. Puzzled, he looked closely. It was a chocolate coin, a prize at bingo earlier in the week. Sorry.
Right. A letter from Councillor Packham, East Cowes. I read with interest the letter from Mrs. Wardrop in the county press of the 8th of February, and this was my question to the informal Isle of Wight Council Cabinet. Why did the Isle of Wight Council borrow £19 million from the government and spend the money in Manchester and Kent? This money surely should have been spent on the island. My supplementary question to the deputy leader was, what guarantee have you got the Isle of Wight Council will make a profit? I'm very concerned with his answer, as he said the Isle of Wight Council would expect to earn 3 to 4 million net per year after repayment if it were able to invest the full 100 million as planned. The real problem is the Isle of Wight does not receive enough money from the government. The government is now spending millions of pounds on a no-deal Brexit, which could have been spent on the NHS, schools and social security.
Doesn't bode well. This is from P.A. Hamilton at Ryde. Do you all get the feeling we're all between a rock and hard place politically and probably going to hell in a handcart? Theresa May was a Remainer, and I've heard most of the civil servants involved in the Brussels negotiations were too. The day after the Brexit vote, I recall saying to friends, I fear Mrs. May will leave us half in and half out. I had no love for Mrs. Thatcher, but I do know she would not have been pushed about by Brussels as Theresa May has been. When in November I saw the look of glee on Messrs. Tusk, Juncker and Barnier, I knew it didn't bode well for us. The mandarins in Europe and our own government, rather arrogantly I feel, were so sure we'd vote Remain, they were completely unprepared for the result. There was no plan B, either for a referendum or Brexit. Doesn't that speak volumes? A great deal of the withdrawal bill, i.e. the heavy lifting of it, some 500 pages, has been done already. Theresa cuts the divisive figure. She has failed. Surely now we need a fresh team leader and a team of all who wanted to leave. Mrs. May had, at the last election, an election you may recall she said she wouldn't call, then did. She could have had a cabinet reshuffle so they were united by Brexit. She could have made the people from other countries living and working here feel valued. She's even handled the immigration bill in a racist and divisive way. For me it is not about nationality and everything about numbers coming here. Our infrastructure cannot sustain 750,000 a year coming in. Many economic migrants. Genuine refugees, of course, need kind care. Captains of industry should remember, without the small cogs in the wheel, the wheel won't turn. For me, I will never forgive this particular government for getting rid of NHS Direct. It's been built up over many years. It ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and took about 14,000 calls per day. Where did all these people go?
A letter from Neil, Jill, Robert and Leanne Clark of Newport. Headline is Angel of Whitelink. Following the recent spell of heavy snow, our 18-year-old daughter Leanne might have been stranded on the mainland if it wasn't for the exceptional kindness of a member of the Whitelink cleaning staff at Lymington. Leanne was on her way home from Plymouth University and was waiting at Lymington for the 9:05 ferry. Unfortunately, due to the severe weather conditions, it was cancelled. And as there were no other sailings, she might have been stranded with no hotels nearby or transport to take her from the terminal. Staff suggested she catch the fast cat service from Portsmouth, but there were no taxis available. On hearing of her predicament, a Whitelink cleaning staff member called Faye, we don't know her surname, who lived in Portsmouth, offered to take Leanne to the ferry terminal. Faye managed to drive safely to Portsmouth and stayed with Leanne to ensure she could catch the fast cat. She also kept us informed regularly by phoning us on her mobile to reassure us that Leanne would not be left on her own. Unfortunately, the fast cat service was also cancelled due to the weather, which meant the only service available was the midnight car ferry. Only when it was confirmed this service would be running did Faye leave Leanne in the care of Whitelink staff at Portsmouth and also arrange to charge her mobile phone so she could keep in touch with her parents. Fortunately, we were able to drive with great difficulty on slippery, snow-covered roads to Fishbourne and awaited her arrival at 12:40 a.m. We feel Faye was absolutely brilliant and she deserves not just recognition from us as worried parents, but also from Whitelink for going out of their way to help our daughter. We've contacted the Chief Executive, Keith Greenfield, about this extraordinary lady and how she went beyond the call of duty to help Leanne, and we'll be sending our thanks to her personally. As far as we're concerned, Faye's the Angel of Whitelink.
Brexit is insane, from Joanna Minchin at Shalfleet. The Isle of Wight may well have voted 63% in favour of leaving the EU, but there are lots of people out here who voted to remain and who feel utterly helpless as we watch the carnage in Parliament. Our MP is a staunch leaver, which adds to our helplessness. However, those who are afraid of what chaos lies ahead can take comfort they are not alone. A group of really interesting people meet once a month, Islanders for Europe, where some members are actually European, but everyone feels European. We are lovers of freedom, cooperation and liberal values, and share the feeling that Brexit is insane. There is a huge and growing pro-EU movement in the country and on the Isle of Wight. Whatever happens, we are Islanders for Europe will continue supporting the UK's membership of the EU.
A letter from Mrs. Daniels in London. The heading is Lost Democracy. Further to Jonathan Young's overview of Brexit in the 18th of January County Press, I would remind him that lost trade deals can be replaced. Lost democracy cannot.
We now move on to looking back, and I'm going to start 100 years ago, February the 13th, 1919. A destructive fire gutted a hairdressing and tobacco saloon. The owner, Mr. H. Howe, returned from his afternoon walk to find the stockroom blazing furiously. The room, full of valuable goods, leather and tobacco, was destroyed, along with all the contents. And also, Mr. Frank Aman of Totland Bay wrote to the county press to go forward the case for a Solent tunnel. He wrote there were many opinions with regard to this undertaking, but said the prosperity of seaside towns depended on a link. He wrote, women, children, even men, are filled with fright at the thought of crossing the water.
Well, 75 years ago, the investigations continued into the live round of ammunition that was left with the dummies during a training session of the Home Guard. One man had been killed at the scene and another had died later in hospital when the live round was shot during a training session. The county press reported an inquest was to be held. Also 75 years ago, the Isle of Wight mourned the death of Captain George Bower, one of the best-known Trinity House pilots in the Southampton service. He had been flying with another military man off the Needles when he dropped dead. His superiors spoke highly of him and said it was a shame he couldn't finish the war.
And 50 years ago, February the 15th, 1969, children were saved from a burning house when the family's small puppy, Sasha, barked and ran around the room till they woke up. The Bembridge home of Mr. and Mrs. Holland's Gems was gutted when a foam-filled pillow was placed too near a wall heater. After being awoken by the dog, the children woke their parents and they all escaped unscathed. Also, same year, the county press reported the Isle of Wight population had met explosion point. The population had exceeded 100,000 for the first time. Members of the Isle of Wight Council were concerned with school spaces, housing and even resources.
25 years ago, snowdrifts of up to 5 feet deep brought traffic chaos to Island Road, with scores of accidents in the hazardous driving conditions. Motorists were advised to stay off the roads, and Arctic winds of -12 Celsius hit the south of the Isle of Wight. Police declared all island roads dangerous, and St Mary's dealt with 51 fractures from falls. Also 25 years ago, a 16-year-old girl saved a toddler from drowning at the swimming pool. Laura Turvey of Seaview had noticed the young girl's mother screaming at the deep end of the pool and immediately jumped in to save her. The mother said, "I want to thank her very much. I'm quite indebted to her."
And finally, 10 years ago, February 13th, 2009, an island dinosaur hunter made headlines around the globe after finding 48 new prehistoric species on the Isle of Wight. For 4 years, Dr. Steve Sweatman of Newport collected tons of sediment before analysing every ounce for traces of ancient life. The result was the discovery of 48 creatures, including 8 new dinosaur species and other animals ranging from lizards to tiny mammals. And finally, wild weather deluged the island, flooding homes and swamping emergency services. Winds gusting to storm force disrupted cross-Solent travel, and the fire and rescue service received hundreds of calls. Trains were cancelled as the railway tunnel between Ryde St John Station and the pier flooded.
Over to White Memories. And the headline is Island's Firefighting Heritage. The history of firefighting on the Isle of Wight will be the subject of a talk at Carisbrooke Castle Museum. Serving Fire Officer Damon Corr will present a packed fly-through of the history of firefighting on the island at the museum on Tuesday, February the 26th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Heroism, Humour and the Hump is the Isle of Wight Fire Brigades Federation's offering for talks throughout 2019 for island audiences. that wish to be entertained and informed with an eclectic mix of the island's firefighting history. Mr. Call introduced the talk and his work in today's IWFBF before allowing the audience to pick a card from a pack of more than 50, each of which will relate to a fire event or series of events that have impacted on the island's firefighting evolution from the time of the Roman occupation until the formation of the island's first county brigade in 1948. Chronology counts for nothing, as the audience randomly select the course of the presentation, through which it will become apparent that whilst no island-wide fire brigade existed before the Second World War, the otherwise disparate groups of firemen were tangibly connected, socially, politically, and philanthropically. Items related to firefighting on the Isle of Wight from the Carisbrooke Castle Museum collection will also be on display for the audience to view. To book your place or find out more about Carisbrooke Castle Museum's winter programme of talks, visit Carisbrooke Castle Museum to book tickets, or contact the museum by emailing Carisbrooke Castle Museum or by calling 523-112. Booking is essential. Tickets cost £8 and include refreshments.
We've got some more Wight memories. This is an article by Brian Greening, Deaths of Newport Misers. In this series of tales of those who lie in our local cemeteries, readers will be introduced to a vast range of individuals, all of whom had one thing in common. They were real people who, like you and I, walked the streets of Newport, and I'll bet in their cases well over 100 years ago. There are two stories of men who, despite having money, were reluctant to spend it and as such lived in squalor. One was James Yelf, who in the consensus for 1871 informs us lived in Exton's Yard in South Street. He lived there with his 74-year-old mother, Susan Yelf, and two of her grandsons. At the time, James was 48 years of age, and under his occupation it stated that he lived on the income from the rent of houses he owned. 8 years later he died, and at the inquest into his death some appalling details came to light. He apparently slept on a pile of rags, and when found was lying thus, with his head on a chair as a pillow, and wearing a shirt that consisted of a few shreds of calico in a filthy condition. In life he would buy out fragments of filthy bacon to eat, and it said he ate every kind of rough garbage. Just why could not be understood, as at his inquest it was further learnt he had over £21 worth of gold and silver in his room, had bank books showing a balance of over £200, and was the owner of no less than 14 houses.
Gosh, yeah. Dr. Castle, who undertook the post-mortem, stated in his opinion the man's death had been accelerated by insufficient food and the want of clothing to protect him from the intense cold. Now, similarly, in 1892, the death of James Lawrence, who lived in Orchard Street, shocked the local community when it was learned how he'd been living prior to his death. In life, Mr. Lawrence had been a cabinet maker, an upholsterer, and a paper hanger. Those who knew him in his younger days stated he'd been an excellent workman. The house where he lived with his wife was described as indescribably filthy, as were the two occupants. A doctor who had at one time attended the man refused to return, such was the stench and the condition of the house. Latterly, gangrene affected one of Mr. Lawrence's legs, and a few days before he died, his foot fell off. When asked about this, his wife admitted that when she discovered this, she picked the foot up and stowed it in a downstairs room. Because it was known that the man was not penniless, he could not be admitted to the workhouse, which would have seen he was better cared for. One person who was admitted to the workhouse was Betty Ballard, who died in 1861. During her life, she made a living, as several other families did later, hiring out rowing boats from her home that was known as Noah's Ark down in Little London, just outside Newport Quay. Described as being both honest and industrious, there came a time when she could no longer look after herself, and as was the case in those days, the workhouse was her only alternative. There she sadly died a few days later and was buried in Mountjoy Cemetery. One man who wasn't buried in either of our two main cemeteries was Maurice Murphy, who in 1865 was an inmate of the workhouse. At the inquest into the death of Mr. Murphy, who died aged just 55, a verdict was returned of death by natural causes. That might be stretching things a little. The man had apparently eaten an inordinate number of oysters and had washed them down with rum that caused him indigestion and resulted in him having an attack of apoplexy, the old word for stroke. Well, at least he probably died happy.
Yeah, right. Okay, we now move on to two My View articles, and this first one is by Jonathan Young. Free lunch for holiday lets must end. The week after next, Isle of Wight councillors will decide on yet more spending cuts and savings. If they're to set a lawful budget, they have no choice but to slash away, because central government shrinks its funding for councils year on year, while effectively capping council tax rises at 2.99%. I do get cross we never get a word of apology from the council's ruling group on behalf of their Westminster political chums pushing us through this year after year, but there we are. Anyway, a couple of months back, council leader Dave Stewart said he wanted Ireland's ideas as to how £5.5 million could be saved this year without damaging vital services. A tall order, but I do have one idea. I can't promise to deliver the whole £5.5 million, but it will involve plugging a leak of cash which ought to be spent elsewhere. It's a loophole County Hall has known about for ages, but seems not to have done much about it. It concerns the rather unsexy topic of the way in which holiday properties get their bins emptied. Holiday lets in England legally now count as businesses if they're available to let for 140 days a year. Bizarrely, there's no requirement to actually let them, and so pay business rates, not council tax. At the same time, businesses with an annual turnover of less than £12,000, a large majority of holiday lets, get small business rate relief of 100%, so they pay neither tax. Great news for the little man, of course, but not so good for the public purse. But that's a government decision and not something Councillor Stewart can immediately do much about. Except, of course, bend the ears of those Westminster chums I mentioned. But here's the rub. Remember the bins. Ireland council tax pays for Amy to empty domestic bins. Businesses, including all those holiday lets, and regardless of whether they get business rate relief or not, are supposed to pay someone, Amy or another contractor, to do the honours or make alternative approved arrangements. County Hall has known for months, if not years, that lots of holiday home owners are paying no council tax and no business rates, 720 of them as of last August. and that many of them are enjoying a free lunch by getting their bins empty for nothing. Just 132 were paying business rates. Freedom of information requests about loss of revenue caused by the legal framework due to response. This information is not held. Generally, when asked in August how many registered holiday lets were using Amy's free domestic waste collection service, the council said currently no data is held. However, it is under investigation. A request before Christmas for an update drew this response. This has not yet progressed. No information has yet been gained. We hope to progress this in 2019. Well, I hope they progress it too, beyond the present information page buried on the council's website, because it would seem to involve little more than comparing two databases and giving quite a lot of people Amy's phone number. And of course, telling Amy where not to collect domestic wheelie bins and paying them a lot less for not doing so. Yes, the island tourist industry needs support in these straitened times, but nearer the front of the queue must surely come, for example, the disabled island kids, who from the 1st of April will see the support offered by the council's dedicated support staff scaled back if current budget proposals are adopted. The council's revenue service department and waste contract managers have some urgent work to do. It's a no-brainer.
This article is by Alan Marriott. Get a dog, they said. You know you want to. Well, with a busy job, sporting social life and a decent-sized garden to tend, and 2 grandchildren to pamper, of course I needed something else to stop me vegetating. Then, of course, there are the 2 resident moggies, one of whom is in her dotage at 21, to add to the mix of making my existence anything but sedate. But I always like a challenge. So the research was done, and the splendidly named Golden Doodle, which sounds like a snack in a pot, was decided on. Off we went last month to select said pup, and after choosing him, the anticipation grew ahead of Saturday's pick-up date. In the meantime, all sorts of considerations came into play: training regimes, food decisions, and most contentiously the thorny issue of a name. Being a fan of the best team in the land and all the world, Man City for the uninitiated, I wanted to call him Sergio, but this was vetoed by the family. And eventually the coming canine was given the name of Wilf, and I still don't know why. My key factor in choosing a name was in my head shouting at him when walking on an island beach. So Wilf it was, and despite a spot of travel sickness on the journey back to the island on Saturday, all went smoothly, and he had a massive approval rating from passengers and staff on the Red Funnel Ferry. Now, the biggest challenge facing young Wilf is the approval of the master of the house, a fearless rescue tomcat plucked from the mean streets of Battersea to be given a lovely home on the island. But once a street fighter, always a street fighter, and Biffy never takes a step backwards with the neighbourhood mutts, once striping the nose of a staffy as a territory marker that left no room for confusion. Biffy is a bit of a wanderer and takes himself off on a regular basis down to Clatterford Shoot, where our lookouts, Jim and Sheila, always keep an eye out for him and report back when he's in residence. Biff and Wilf are currently eyeing each other up, but the jury is out as to how it's going to work out. I had big reservations and worried Biff would pack his things and head off to Clatterford for a quiet life, but it seemed curiosity has piqued the cat, and they could end up bosom buddies. I know I'm writing about small furry creatures in a world with much bigger problems and concerns, but I make no apologies, as it takes all sorts of light and shade.
Okay, move on to what's on. Action on Hearing Loss have got 2 places they will be attending. The first one is County Hall, Newport, in the High Street between 10 a.m. and noon on Tuesday for its monthly drop-in. And the other one is Wootton Community Centre between 10 and 11 on Thursday for advice, batteries, cleaning and retubing of NHS hearing aids. There's no appointment necessary, but for both places, if you want further information, 529 533.
This is West Wight. The John Clare Wind Quintet will perform a family concert at Freshwater Library on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. The music will be wide-ranging with something to appeal to everyone. Light refreshments will be served and a retiring collection made for friends of Freshwater Library funds. Also in West Wight, The Magic of Great Music, presented by David Shirley, is being held at Freshwater Memorial Hall Annex on Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. and is entitled Operetta, a Grand Spectacle, with music from Offenbach to Lopez. £3 to cover hire of hall and refreshments.
Jimmy Cricket back for a matinee variety show. Veteran comedian Jimmy Cricket will be meeting up with old friends when he performs at Shanklin Theatre on Wednesday. Jimmy played a summer season at Sandown Pavilion in the early 80s when he met Isle of Wight comedy writer Raymond Alley. Jimmy was a big fan of Raymond's classic comedy series Some Mothers Do Have 'Em. We hit it off and Ray wrote a pilot sitcom for me entitled Call Me Jimmy, he said. It was about a well-intentioned odd job man who caused havoc in his neighbourhood when he goes about trying to fix things. Although the TV bods didn't go for it, it started a lifelong friendship between us, and when I come to Shanklin, the theatre, I know when I peep out of the curtain before the show, Ray and his wife Nancy will be out there cheering me on. And during the show for another good Isle of Wight friend, Vic Farrow. Vic helped me meet another of my showbiz heroes, Sir Cliff Richard. Cliff used to do an annual charity tennis tournament in Birmingham, and Vic was one of the people that helped him organise it. Well, he pulled a few strings, and before I knew it I was whacking balls at the great man himself. Jimmy Cricket's variety show with special guest May Marion is a matinee performance at Shanklin Theatre on Wednesday at 2:30.
Also, as well as Jimmy Cricket at the Shanklin Theatre, we have on Saturday the 23rd Lee Memphis King at 7:30. Thursday the 28th of February, Sherlock Holmes, The Sign of Four, again at 7:30. Then into March, our continuation of Sherlock Holmes, Sign of Four, Friday the 1st, and that continues on Saturday the 2nd, and there's 2 performances then at 2:30 and 7:30. And then on March the 8th at 7:30, there's Irish Dance Gale Force. Saturday the 9th, 7:30, Oh What a Feeling. Sunday the 10th, at 4 o'clock, the Magnificent Music Hall. Monday the 25th, Calabro at 7:30. Thursday the 28th, Mark Steele at 8 o'clock. And the 30th, Saturday the 30th, Elkie Brooks at 7:30. Well, I'm glad Mark Steele's back again, as he was in Ventnor not so long ago, and he's extremely funny.
I've seen Elkie Brooks a few times, and she's very good.
Oh,
yeah.
right. Action on hearing loss. This is Bembridge Methodist Church, Forelands Road, Bembridge, between 10 a.m. and 12 noon on Tuesday for their monthly drop-in and coffee morning. Go for advice, batteries, cleaning and retuning of NHS hearing aids. No appointment necessary, and for more information call 529 533.
Sports Bar plans to make alterations. The Hogshead pub in Newport is planning a range of upgrades and alterations. The High Street pub has lodged plans with the Isle of Wight Council to improve the layout of the pub's interior and to improve its facilities as a sports bar. If the plans go ahead, new fixed seating booths will be built in the area by the bar when the pool tables currently stand, and the pool tables will be moved back into the area at the rear, which currently houses a walkway to the garden, a bottle store and boiler room, which will be converted into a new disabled toilet. The new booths will be fitted with individual televisions and USB sockets. There would also be new booths in the dining area, as well as fresh timber flooring and carpet on the lower area. The bar would also be altered with the removal of a stud wall to allow staff to walk around the back of the bar, and new tiled flooring around the bar for customers.
Well, this is about parking free at St Mary's Hospital. St Mary's Hospital will offer free parking to visitors when lengthy queues build up at ticket machines. A new system was installed at the Newport Hospital a year ago. An automatic number plate recognition system replaced the former pay and display machines. However, queues continue to form as visitors now pay before leaving rather than on arrival. At a meeting of the Trust Board last Thursday, hospital bosses said steps were being taken to reduce queues and delays to people leaving the hospital grounds after visitors complained of sight problems when using the new machines. Steps include the installation of a telephone next to the machine, positioning officers next to the machines during peak times, and offering free parking during times when lengthy queues build up. Chief Executive Maggie Oldham said, "We've had relatively few official complaints about the new parking system when you consider how many thousands of people use the car park at the hospital."
Year-long effort for charity brings in cash. Island's road staff have raised more than £2,700 for Island charity Ability Dogs for Young People. After the staff chose the cause as their charity of the year for 2018, the team held quiz nights, dress-down days, sweepstakes and a 24-hour bikeathon to raise the funds. Maria Eskandel, who helped organise staff charity events, said, "We are delighted with the total raised, which is the most we have collected in a single year. It shows just how much of a chord the charity struck with staff. The money will enable the charity to buy a new puppy, which Islands Road staff have already named Dougal, and will help towards the cost of his training. Ability dogs help young people with physical and mental disabilities, including cerebral palsy, autism, diabetes and epilepsy, by assisting with practical tasks, increasing their well-being, confidence and self-esteem." Carol Court, founder and CEO of Ability Dogs for Young People, said, "This is a fantastic boost for us and we are very grateful to the staff at Island Roads." Island Road staff have chosen Newport-based Homestar as their charity for 2019.
This is an award, a bird photo award. An island photographer has been shortlisted for 2 awards in the Bird Photographer of the Year Awards. Sienna Anderson, a County Press freelance photographer, won the Birds in Flight category last year with her photograph Freedom, and this year has been shortlisted for Best Portrait as well as Birds in Flight.
And it's goodbye from Paul.
And goodbye from Sarah.
This is the BBC.
This is InTouch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, the guide dogs which suffer attacks from so-called pet dogs and why some of their owners think not enough is being done to help when it does happen. And the guide runners whose efforts at the London Marathon won't be in vain after all. But first, the steady stream of attacks on guide dogs continues. Almost 150 in 2017, the last year for which there are figures on working guide dogs, dogs in training and retired and breeding guide dogs. This despite legislation handing out tougher punishments to owners who fail to control their dogs, and a campaign by the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association itself to make owners take more responsibility for their animals. But some guide dog owners are also telling us that their own association isn't doing enough to support guide dogs and their owners when this happens. Emily Brothers is one of the most recent owners to be involved in such an incident, and our reporter Dave Williams has been to see her and her dog Truffle.
What breed is she? Is she a Labrador or...?
Yeah, cross lab retriever.
I'll just close the door behind me. So Truffle's 4, so
Yep.
that means you've had Truffle...
She's coming up to 4.
Right, so that means you've had Truffle for nearly 2 years?
Yes, just over 2 years, yes. She is a great guide dog. She's a bold little dog, so I need a dog with lots of confidence. She's a very loving dog, and I would say from the outset that Truffle's puppy walker Vivian and trainer Becca have done an amazing job with her. She's a great guide dog.
Okay, so we're heading off down your road. How's Truffle in the rain?
Yeah, she's fine.
Yeah?
Some dogs hate it, but she is. On November the 6th, I'd been to a Labour Party meeting locally and was walking back home with 3 friends who live sort of halfway between the meeting venue and my home, so the plan was that I would leave them at the halfway point. We walked along the road up to a common area called Sutton Green around about 10 p.m. at night, and we were just approaching the green when 2 dogs came from literally nowhere from the green, and one of them pulled Truffle by her harness and took her forcibly around 20 yards away and then proceeded with an attack. The other dog was barking, didn't attack Truffle but was barking. As you can imagine, it was very scary. I initially shouted, that didn't help, so I pulled out my smartphone and hit emergency services and spoke to them in a rather desperate way, telling them that they had to get out to Sutton Green, that Truffle was being attacked, and my friend Phil then waded in amongst the 3 dogs and very bravely pulled Truffle out.
And how was Truffle?
She wasn't stressed at the time. She was actually more anxious by the surgery and the aftermath.
How did the police react, firstly?
After the attack, we had to wait around about 10-15 minutes for the police to arrive, at which point they talked to us, and we then went to my friend's home to take statements, check Truffle over and arrange for her to see a vet. And Truffle had an operation in the early hours of the morning, lasting a good hour, to stitch the wound. Several stitches, very deep, and it was bleeding for about a month.
You must have been terrified, Emily.
It was terrifying, and that sheer feeling of hopelessness, that there was nothing I could do, and the realisation that if I'd been on my own, Truffle may well have been killed, or her injury is so extensive that she would never have worked again.
And how did you feel about the way
the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association handled your report?
I think it's useless. I think their response was pathetic. They failed to provide reassurance by coming out to see Truffle. Animal welfare never followed up. An instructor didn't come out to support us getting back into working mode. Engagement or other staff failed to liaise with the police. I was also quite frustrated by GDBA talking about the attacking dogs as pets rather than dangerous dogs. I think that said to me something about their attitude to this situation. Basically, guide dogs were uncoordinated, and that's why I want them and other agencies and organisations to come together in order to provide a more coordinated response when blind people are victims of a crime.
What message do you have for the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association?
It's time to take incidents of attacks on guide dog owners seriously before a guide dog is killed or a blind person is seriously injured. GDBA have a clear responsibility in protecting guide dogs and guide dog owners, and they're failing in that duty.
Do you feel more vulnerable now as a blind person following this incident?
Yes. I'm a fairly tough person, so I will get through it, but I'm more nervous when other dogs are around because they can be so unpredictable. I also feel very vulnerable because I know that if I am in that situation on my own, I find it difficult, the feeling that I can't sort it. I can't protect my dog.
That's Emily Brothers and Truffle, now happily recovering. Emily's case isn't the only one either that we've heard about. A change in the law in 2014 meant that irresponsible owners could face up to 3 years imprisonment. But the attacks go on. I'm joined by John Carlin, Director of Operations for the South East region of Guide Dogs for the Blind Association. John, we'll talk about your campaign against this in a moment, but first of all, what can you say to Emily, who feels she didn't get the support she needed after what she says was a terrifying ordeal?
Well, firstly, I'd like to start by saying how very sorry we were to hear that this experience that Emily has received since the horrific attack on Truffle back in November last year. If there's anything that we can learn, we most definitely will. What I can say is that from a support point of view, that since the attack on the 6th of November, Emily's case was supported by a dog care and welfare team who would be involved and were involved to authorise the vet treatment. And the engagement officer support was there for Emily regarding this case.
But shouldn't a visit before the dog starts working again be the very least an owner should expect in this situation?
Absolutely, and that's the point I was coming on to. So the last communication with Emily specifically was the fact that once Truffle was back to full health, a visit would be conducted to support Truffle and Emily working again. However, the ball was left with Emily, and at this stage we hadn't received contact to state that Truffle was actually ready and able to start working again.
But I mean, 2 months has gone by. I would have thought that with a serious case like this, with the police being involved, that the guide dogs would have visited her as a matter of course.
Whilst specifically around this case, a visit could have been had in the meantime, we were of the opinion that Emily would be contacting us. We're very, very happy to look at this case. It came to us yesterday, so this is the first time we've heard of the issues and the concerns raised.
I mean, is there a staffing problem here? Is it that you don't have enough people to do this kind of visit?
No, not at all. We have world-class specialist staff who train our guide dogs and partnerships. We continue to recruit and train dedicated staff to deliver our life-changing services.
Now, the Guide Dogs Association does have a campaign taking the lead. Why do you think that the legislation that you helped to secure doesn't seem to have lessened the number of attacks?
What we'd like to see is that every force ensure that officers and call handlers specifically are appropriately trained to prioritise these attacks. We're very happy to work with the local force, and as an example, our Suffolk services have recently had funding secured to help develop online training which supports training officers and call handlers in the handling of dog attacks.
I mean, have you been in touch, for example, with the police over this case?
Quick response, yes, we have. Our engagement officers followed up after having a conversation with Emily towards the end of November last year. Whilst we can discuss with the police, we are limited in terms of how much we can actually influence from their point of view.
I know part of what you're doing is trying to put more pressure on owners. Isn't the problem with this kind of campaign is that you reach already responsible owners, but not the kind who allow their dogs to cause this kind of trouble?
In terms of influencing the general public around how their dog is behaving in a communal public space, we are members of the Microchipping Alliance. So this is around ensuring that all dogs are now microchipped and managed appropriately.
What I identified with most in Emily's story really was, although I'm not a guide dog owner myself, the sense of powerlessness she felt while her dog was being attacked. I mean, what advice can you offer to owners about how to cope in these situations?
Ultimately, we would ask that people don't intervene. This is very traumatic and very difficult when it's their guide dog.
It's absolutely human nature, isn't it, to get involved? Yeah. John Carlin, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And of course, your comments are always welcome. We'll be giving you a new way to contact us at the end of this programme. Our inbox has been rammed this week with emails thanking us for drawing attention to Blind School. That was last Tuesday afternoon's radio play about Nina, a girl losing her sight and trying to adjust to life at special school. All those we heard praised the acting and the writing, and it clearly triggered many memories and listeners who identified strongly with the characters. Here's a selection.
I would have been interested to listen simply as it was a good afternoon drama, but I'm 63 now and have diabetic macular edema for about 15 years, from which I have lost a fair degree of sight already, and I can relate only too clearly to Nina's predicament, having some residual sight and face the prospect of this deteriorating over time. It left me wondering whether this left open any avenue to have a follow-on, looking at Nina's life adapting to increasing blindness, as that is something that scares me silly, as it obviously scared her in this play.
I was in a similar situation to Nina. I went from a partially sighted school to Lickey Grange, a specialist school for blind children in Birmingham. I was 11 and had quite a bit of useful sight. I found it very difficult to come to terms with blind children. I survived but was very lonely despite making friends. I felt that my mother had deserted me and was totally unable to realise at that age that it must have been doubly hard for her, having recently been widowed, to have to lose her only child as well. I can't stop crying over the memories the play brought back.
I myself went to Chorley Wood School for Blind Girls in the 60s and experienced exactly what Nina felt. I hated boarding school, being separated from my friends and family. I'd never met anyone who was blind before and was shocked to be labelled blind myself. I remember seeing all the blind girls going about their daily tasks and feeling that I certainly wasn't one of them. I hated Braille, all those huge books with no pictures, and the horrible white sticks, only symbol canes in those days. This drama really brought back all those feelings which I'd forgotten.
It was fantastic. My partner Alan and my friend Grace also thoroughly enjoyed it. It sort of mirrored my experience many years ago. The play was beautifully constructed and well acted. I just hope thousands of sighted people listened and absorbed the content.
Those thoughts from Sue Marshall, Pam Willingham, Val Brown and Tony Price. And we've also had a lot of reaction to our extended podcast which followed our preview of the play. That started by chatting about the complex relationship between partially sighted and totally blind people at school, but as is the way with podcasts, it went off in several directions.
I was that person who could see more than a lot of people at the time. We went to Milton Keynes shopping centre once and we were in a big crocodile with me at the front and we were looking for a shop or something and I stopped what I thought was my dog's having a dream under the table there. Sally. I stopped what I thought was a person and asked them the way, and then didn't answer me, and I was getting really annoyed with them, thinking they're so rude, and it was a shop dummy.
We've all done it. We've all done it.
Well, I've got my favourite one of those is we were hitchhiking, and four of us were totally blind, and one of us could see a little bit. Ian, I think he's still about. We were coming back from the pub, and we had to go to the youth hostel, and we hadn't got a clue where we were going. And we were in Cornwall near the coast, and Ian was saying, it's all right, I'm following a light. Turned out this light was a lighthouse.
My wife and I, both totally blind, would like to say how much we enjoyed listening to the extended podcast of last night's programme. We found the discussion after the main programme both interesting and amusing, and could definitely empathise with many of the points raised. We feel that for people like us who grew up through the system, there probably is a blind culture.
I am a sighted pensioner, the daughter of a blind father, and have always enjoyed listening to InTouch, but have only today discovered your podcast. I want to say how much I enjoyed listening to the extended section when you were telling all the anecdotes about your experiences at school. It just sounded as if you were all having a lot of fun and enjoying each other's company, and maybe this obvious camaraderie is what makes the programme so special.
Yeah, we think it's rather special too. That was Eva Smith. Before that, you heard Bill Guest. And partly encouraged by your reactions, we're going to be repeating the exercise when it seems as if the subjects we're covering could benefit from a longer airing on a podcast. Your suggestions for such subjects are welcome, as usual. And we're always keen to satisfy your curiosity about what happens after we deal with an issue. Several of you, including Simon Elliott, wanted to know what happened when the London Marathon Board met to discuss whether guide runners should receive official acknowledgement for their efforts. Well, here's the marathon organiser himself, Hugh Brasher, with some news.
We're delighted to say that over the last few months we have been reviewing our policy for guide and support runners in the marathon. The guide or support runner will still apply for a free of charge place. The time in Japan number will be allocated to that guide or support runner, and the time of the guide or support runner will be a time that matches the runner that they are guiding. They will get a medal at the finish line officially, so they did previously, but it wasn't official.
Why has it taken so long to bring this relatively simple change about? Most of the other prestigious marathons around the world have been doing this for some time.
There are a myriad of things that we have been working on over a number of years to improve processes and encourage more participants with disabilities. Doing marathons, especially when you have 415,000 people applying for them, is very complicated and something that looks very simple. You have to make sure that you have the right processes in place to be able to implement it.
So what will happen now if one of the visually impaired runners has to drop out? Because that was one of your concerns, wasn't it?
If the runner that is being guided drops out, then the person who was due to guide or support them is not able to start.
Hugh Brasher. So, now you know. And still with sport, congratulations to one of the foremost visually impaired athletes of the moment. Skier Menna Fitzpatrick has just returned from the Alpine Para World Skiing Championships in Italy with 5 medals, including 2 golds in the super giant slalom and downhill categories. Well done, Menna. And that's it for today, but we can tell you about a change in the way you can contact the programme to make your comments or give us your views. You can now call 0161 836 1338, and when you do call this number, calls are charged at the standard geographic rate, although calls from mobiles may cost more. Leave us a message there, we'll get back to you as soon as we can, or as usual, you can email intouch@bbc.co.uk or visit our website www.bbc.co.uk/intouch. That's it from me, Peter Wight, producer Tom Walker this week, and the team. Goodbye.
Scaffolding news for Friday the 15th of February 2019. Please find below a list of known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding, hoarding, also details of skips, cranes and cherry pickers. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. The Cows area. Current scaffolds. 93 High Street Cows, scaffold up within hoarding. The White Hart Inn, Dover Road East Cows. Pierview Hotel, Terminus Road Cows. Current hoardings. 93 High Street Cows. Current skips, 11 Stanley Road Cows. Pending skips, 19 Mill Hill Road Cows. Newport area. Current scaffolds, the Wheatsheaf Hotel, St Thomas's Square, Newport. Claire's Accessories, 41 High Street, Newport. Barnett's, 73 High Street, Newport. Ride area. Current scaffolds, Gardener's Cottage, Upper Green Road, St Helens. King Lud, 2 Esplanade Ride. Coburg's Nightclub, Union Street Ride. Headshot, 9 Cross Street Ride. 21 The Strand Ride. Current skips, 2 Spithead Close, Seaview. Carita, Stane Road, Seaview. Current mobile crane, bus lay-by west of Fishbourne Lane, Kite Hill, Wootton. And building materials and hoarding, car park, Brooks Road, Bembridge.
Sandown and Shanklin area. Current scaffolds. The Toymaster, 103 High Street, Sandown. Wilmar Dorkin and Vermaper Cottages, Church Street, Newchurch. Brian Cook Furnishers, 77 High Street, Shanklin. Trouville Hotel, 10 to 16 Esplanade, Sandown. The Ocean Hotel Townhouses, High Street, Sandown. Co-op Food Store, 63 to 67 High Street, Sandown. Serenity, 83A, High Street, Sandown. 5 Palmerston Road, Shanklin. Pending scaffolds, Bar 64, 64 High Street, Shanklin. Current skips, Co-op Store, 63 to 67 High Street, Sandown. 8 Hill Street, Sandown. Current hoardings, Premier Inn, 1 to 9 Esplanade, Sandown. Junction of St Boniface Road and Arthur's Hill, Shanklin. Ventnor area. Current scaffolds. Corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road, Ventnor. 1 Boniface Road and into Trinity Road, Ventnor. Current skips. Seascape, St Catherine's Road, Knighton. West Wight area, none at present. Vehicle crossings under construction. 51 Nelson Road, Newport. Holiday Cottage, Appleford Lane, Whitwell. New Wolverton Farm, Doctors Lane, Shorewell. 31 Garfield Road, Shanklin. 14 Paddock Close, God's Hill. 18 Queen's Road, Sandown. 2 Fir Tree Close, Shanklin. 6 New Road, Brading. 18 Moorview, God's Hill. 10 Meaders Road, Ryde. Carisbrook College entrance, Mountbatten Drive, Newport. 36 Lower Highland Grove, in Surbiton Grove, Ryde.